Hello everyone, today we're doing a front brake pad change on a 2012 Nissan Sentra. These are the tools that you're going to need. Got rubber mallet in case you get something that doesn't cooperate when trying to loosen or take the wheel off. Flathead screwdriver for removing the pads. Ratchet with a 14mm socket for the brake calipers. You're going to need a C-clamp or some sort of vice grip to compress the caliper piston. Breaker bar and a pipe for cheating with a 13/16 socket on the end. Alright, we'll get started. Alright, so we're here at the car. Before you get everything jacked up, what you want to do is you want to loosen your lug nuts. Use that with your breaker bar. A lot of times it helps to also use the cheater bar. Slide that over the end like that. Gives you some extra leverage. You just want to loosen them. You don't want to take them all the way off yet. So loosen them up. And once we get all these loosened, we'll be right back. Alright, it's important to remember that by loosen, we just break them loose. We don't actually undo the lugs. We don't want to remove any of the pressure on that until we get the vehicle jacked up. On the Sentra, there's a jacking point right here. You see the notches. I've got a little small hydraulic jack. You can use the jack that comes with the vehicle, or if you have an extra jack, external jack, it just makes it a bit easier. So we're going to go ahead and jack up the car, and we'll be right back. An important piece to pay attention to is the jacking point on the vehicle has two notches in it. It's designed to keep the jack head from sliding in and out, preventing your vehicle from slipping off of the jack. You want to make sure on a level surface, smooth. Safety is the most important thing when doing this. Alright, so now we've got the vehicle jacked up. You want to jack it up far enough that the wheel will actually turn, because you've got to be able to get the wheel off of the vehicle once you loosen up the lugs. So we've got a wheel cover on this. Don't try to pull the wheel cover off before you pull the lugs off, because the lugs are what's holding it on. So if you want to have to replace a wheel cover as well, go ahead and yank it. Otherwise, be patient and wait. We're going to take the lugs off, and then we'll do an update after that. Be right back. Alright, so we've got all the lugs off. You can see here the wheel cover comes off fairly easily. It does have locking tabs, but they don't, after a while, don't all hold all that well. So set this aside. Make sure you set your lugs aside. You don't want to lose those. Your lug nuts right here. Usually try to put them all together in one spot with everything else. So now we're just going to pull the wheel off. Sometimes the wheel will get stuck and you need that rubber mallet. You can see it's not coming off. So a couple of sharp blows with your trusty hammer should take care of that. There we go. Wheels off. I'm going to go ahead and pull that off and set it off to the side, and then we'll get on to the next step. Alright, so we've got the wheel off. You can see here's your rotor, your caliper, the pads are right in here. You see the locking tab here. When you get the wheel off, which one of the things you want to make sure you check is you want to check some bushings. You want to check your boots. Make sure there's nothing torn. Make sure you don't have any excessive fluids, or any fluids really, coming out of any of these. Constant velocity axles. One of the things I did notice on mine is my strut. The rubber boot for the strut is broken. So what's happening now is I'm starting to get debris from the road, water, dirt, sand. I live in a sandy area, so a lot more susceptible to problems with my struts. So now I'm going to begin getting premature wear on my struts. So I need to look at replacing these here fairly soon. Everything generally looks good. There's a lot of meat on the rotor. It's smooth, so I'm not seeing that I have any issues with my brakes, other than just standard wear and tear. You can see how much is left. See if I can get that to focus. See how much is left on the rotor. On the brake pad. We'll get these pulled off and compare them to the new one, so you can see what a little bit of mileage does on your pads, how much braking, they take. Alright, so step, take our ratchet with our 14 millimeter socket. We're looking at this point here, and on the opposite side, there's the other bolt here. These two bolts hold your caliper onto the mounting frame for it. So it takes a couple turns on that. You may need your rubber mallet at this point also to break these loose. You want to make sure you're following the righty tighty lefty loosey rule of thumb to get these loosened up. So I'm going to go ahead and get these loose, and we'll be right back. Alright, so I've got them broken loose. They're now finger loose. So the older the vehicle, the more miles it has on it, the more debris and foul weather you drive through, the harder these are going to be to get loosened up. So once you get these loose, set those aside someplace where you're not going to misplace them. And then we're going to pull the caliper itself right here. Now pay attention, there's a brake line connecting this to the car, so you don't want to pull on it, break it, then you have a whole nother world of issues you have to deal with. What you can do is you can take a wire coat hanger, bend it, hook it through here, and hook it up to your coil. Keep it out of the way. Sometimes you can just set it off to the side and it'll be just fine. I'm just going to prop it up right here for now until I can put the camera down and put it someplace. So at this point, you can take your screwdriver and work your pads out. There's a little ridge that it locks into here and down here. You want to try to slide it out as evenly as possible. If you get one out too much of an angle, sometimes it'll get pinched in place and be even more challenging to get out. So you just want to be careful, make sure you don't beat up your rotor when doing this, and get your other side as well. Sometimes these can be a bit of a struggle, other times not. So one of the things you want to pay attention to is how these come off, because remember, you've got another set that's replacing them. You need to know some of these, there's an orientation that will affect how they go back in. You can look, this is the outside of the brake pads. You see how there's different wear patterns. So this is the caliper bracing, and this is the piston itself. So the pistons are usually on the inside. On the Sentras, they're on the inside. So this piece would go on the inside of the rotor. It would go on this side. One of the other things you want to pay attention to when you're putting them back in is what side goes to the rotor. So you want your pad side, your whether it's metallic, semi-metallic, whatever types of pads you've got, ceramic, that's going to go against your rotor, which is the metal piece here. So the pressure that this applies to one another is what actually stops your vehicle. The other thing you want to pay attention to is this has a shape. See how it's rounded on the outside, concave on the inside? You want to make sure that this is to the outside of your rotor. So effectively, it's going to look like this. This, however, goes on the inside. So this would be the one that would go right out here. Okay? A couple of little cheats in case you forget to pay attention when you pull them apart, or if you forget. All right, I'm gonna go get the new pads, and they'll be actually right here. So let's do a little comparison, new versus old. So these are the new pads. This is the old pad. So easiest way to tell what's going on with them, we're going to put these like this, and you're going to show you side by side how much meat is left from one compared to the other. And you see that these have been on the car for a while. How do you know when to change your pads? these little tabs right here will cause the brakes to squeal whenever you apply them. So when your brakes are squealing, that's typically a sign that it's time to change your brake pads. So the other thing to pay attention to is some of these new pad kits come with these clips. These are retaining clips that will help hold your pad in place on the frame. This particular kit did not come with these tabs, so I have to make sure that if they don't and your vehicle is equipped with them, you need to make sure that you do not damage these taking them out, because your pad will not stay in position properly if you damage these tabs. Now they pop out. If you did have one with the kit, these pop out pretty easily. You can take a screwdriver or your finger, they pop out and they pop right back in. I'll pop this one out for you real quick so you can see. Just slide out just like that. Your new ones are going to be bright and shiny. Slip back in, just push it in. So then once you figure out where you're going to line which one to, and it's just a matter of sliding it in. Make sure you don't have any pebbles or dirt or anything in between them, because it will cause a grinding. So a little difficult one-handed, but there's these tabs right here that you want to slide inside here. And just like when taking them off, putting them on, you want to make sure you're not getting too much of an angle, otherwise it won't slide on. So after struggling with that for a little bit with one hand, I decided to put the camera down and go with two, and it goes in a lot easier. So again, just make sure you're putting them in evenly. Put them in, both of them slide in, and now we take our C-clamp, and what we're going to do is we're going to take one of our old pads right here, and this again is going to take two hands or a helper. So what we're trying to do right now is this piston right here. As your brake pads wear down, this will move its way out. So right now it's out. You saw how much meat was no longer left on the pads versus the new right there. So that piston has moved out far enough to compensate for that difference. So now if we try to put this on without compressing this piston, we're not going to be able to fit the caliper back over these new pads. So you take, it's pretty deep in there. You can get a tool that this is specifically designed for, or if you have a C-clamp, or like I've got a wide vice grip. So what I'll do is I'll take this and I'll cover that piston like this. I'll prop that right there, and I'll take my vice grip, put it around this, and squeeze it and slowly compress that piston back into place. The reason I say slowly is if you move too fast with this, the brake fluid is going to compress inside the line just like it would when you're pressing on your brake in the vehicle while driving, and you have an opportunity for your master cylinder to overpressurize and have brake fluid leak out and drip down into under your hood, and also you'd have to at that point bleed your brakes and put more brake fluid in. So you open yourself up to a lot of problems. So just take your time with this part, and it should work out better for you in the end. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, and I'll be right back. Alright, I'm going to videotape this while doing this so you can see the cylinder begin to compress. So you want to do this until the cylinder is all the way in, until this pad pretty much rests flush with the side of the caliper here. Alright, so now we've got this compressed all the way. I'm going to release my clamp, set that aside, take the old pad, set it aside. So this is what we're working with now. So now Remember, keep in mind you've got the brake cable attached to everything. You want to slide this back into place. As close to like that as possible. And again, one-handed, this can be a little bit challenging. So there we go. You want to make sure that these sliders work in and out. If you got one of these that are seized up, you need to get it replaced, or at least get it broken loose. So then we're going to take those 2 bolts that we had earlier, that we said to set aside and don't lose. 2 bolts, and we're going to thread them back in through here. Sometimes they don't line up right away. Actually, most of the time they don't line up right away, and you have to move your caliper around until you get that lined up just right. So I'm going to go ahead and do that, and then be right back. Alright, so I've got them started, so I'm going to tighten them down finger tight. The ratchet with the 14mm. Again, following the rules of righty tighty, lefty loosey, and tighten them up. I'll be right back. Alright, so we've changed the pads. Bolts are tightened up. We've done a quick inspection of everything inside the vehicle, inside the fender well of the vehicle, to make sure that we don't have any future problems starting to come up for us. So at this point in time, we take our tire and put it back on. Alright, so we got the tire lined up in here. So key point is to make sure you line up your bolts. You try to get 2 of them lined up, and then put it back on the vehicle, and then put your lug nuts on finger tight, and we'll pick up right there in just a second. So I realized I just told you to put the lug nuts back on, but we have our wheel cover we've got to put on. This is the only vehicle I've got that has a wheel cover, so I forgot that part. Key piece to this is your valve stem. There's a little cutout that has to line up. What you want to do, you want to make sure you get that as close to center as possible, because it'll help with when you're tightening your lugs up. There. These over the center, and then you can put them on finger tight. Remember, when tightening these, you follow the manufacturer's requirement for the pattern. 4 lugs, usually opposite. There's usually a star pattern that you go to. 5 lug, 6 lug, 7 lug have variations to the pattern, but for this one it's a cross. So I'm going to go ahead and finish putting these on finger tight, and then we'll be right back. Alright, so we've got these mostly finger tight. Go ahead and use the lug wrench, breaker bar to put these on. So what you want to do is you want to make sure you get these tight before you drop the vehicle down onto the ground. If you don't, you might compromise how secure it is onto the vehicle. Might break a stud, might lose a tire while driving down the road. It could be a pretty dangerous situation. So you want to make sure that you tighten these as best as you can before you drop the vehicle down to the ground to do your final torque. Now, if you've used a breaker bar or a cheater, which is that pipe, to get these off, you do not want to use this cheater to put them back on. You want to get them on tight once you get it down. There's actually torque specifications that you should be technically using a torque wrench to put these on at the specification that the manufacturer, that Nissan, tells you to. One thing to remember, if you put them on gorilla tight, you're going to be possibly stuck on the side of the road. You, your wife, maybe your son or your daughter decides to take your vehicle. and ends up with a flat tire late at night on the side of the road, unable to use the equipment provided in the vehicle to do the spare tire change. That can cause a lot of issues for you, your family members, or whoever's driving your vehicle at that point in time. So be aware of what's going on. It's good to have it tight, but too tight, you really compromise additional safety for those around you. That's why they have the requirements from the manufacturer. So hope you've enjoyed this video. Hope it's been helpful. Keep your eyes open for more as more of these little fixes and tweaks come up. Thanks.